End of the road with Churchill. Double hit point Moabs. Can't wait to procrastinate. You'll have to wait a little bit later. We will be playing Turnip Boy Commits Tax Evasion. I saw the game. It looked fun. I asked the devs for a key. They said sure. I think that's the disclaimer I've got to say. Is Captain Churchill good? Yes. You can insert any hero's name in that question and the answer is yes. And anyone who tells you otherwise is just not good with that hero themselves. Potentially the game as a fundamental as well. Turnip Boy looks pretty good. It's not supposed to be very long, but you know, that's what she said. Okay. So one of the reasons not to, you know, indulge yourself in instas and powers or whatever costs in-game currency is because it costs in-game currency. Only do badges you haven't completed. Don't try to do all the badges on easy maps before moving on to intermediate maps. Okay. Some of the badges on the easy maps are a lot harder, and some of the intermediate maps are easier than the easy maps. Okay. But I would definitely recommend to people doing the easy badges on the beginner and intermediate maps. A lot of monkey money to be earned in there. Right? You get a lot less monkey money for repeating the same map or the same badge, but the first time you do a badge, lots of money. You should be able to buy all the heroes with very minimal gameplay. And when you get better, like doing some of the advanced map badges are worth a lot of money. Expert maps are tough. I've hardly done any of the expert map stuff. But I've got a healthy dose of the easy maps across the other 3 categories done. Not most of them, and a lot of the medium ones. And yes, man with that hair, that's what she means. Sad face. Not for you, not me, of course. I'm Australian. Yeah, also we're going to check out Lost Words from Beyond the Pages on Friday. At some stage in the middle, I want to check out Sir Lovelot and Sizable. Maybe do another Arcanium run. Do I want to put another... We go greedy? You guys like being greedy? I like being greedy. I think Severo spent his entire weekend arcaning. Probably shouldn't have been greedy, but we should be fine by the looks of it. A bit tight. Greed is good.
The Sun Guard fights on the side with the best artillery.
Arcanium's early access, yeah. They've got a big roadmap planned. Kind of impressive. No, I don't think so. I don't think there ever will be one. That's a bit harsh. There probably will be one eventually, but...
At your service.
Interesting. How much do I care about that little guy? Not that much.
They are getting through.
Was STM that's an anomaly? No. It just combined it like it was good timing. It could be on the, I'd say maybe on the edge of an anomaly. Oh, it should be. One of the bigger differences between STS and a lot of the games that have tried to emulate is that and it's different after playing, like, I've got to think back to, like, playing for the first few times. And it's tough, because you can't unsee certain things and whatnot. STS is difficult enough the first time through that you could quite easily not win runs. And some of it from information you don't have yet. Things like, you know, any boss that heals up, or champion raging, or Lagavulin, and you know, elites that do things can catch players by surprise, right? Even on the earlier levels, and the bosses need to have some sort of strategy. I think a lot of games that come out, bosses tend to be too generic.
Try this.
Where you don't need any specific strategy to beat. And when they do, and STS had the same quibbles from people saying the game was too much RNG. But it kind of fed into a casual player base because it had simplified a lot of systems that's you know, deck building and roguish games and stuff had they're sort of unfriendly. Either the numbers were hidden, like you look at a lot of the, especially card games, or even just straight up dungeon crawl games, like turn-based, that were very sort of JRPG in style.
Moabs class Bloon inbound.
There's a lot of hidden information from the players.
Try this.
Usually in regards to what enemies were doing. You just wouldn't know. So you had to either know the enemies' patterns or what they were doing, or it was randomed a little bit. And it always sort of felt, well, what do I attack? Do I need to heal? Are they attacking this guy? Do I need to just... And so some of the dominant strategies were just defend up and attack when you can, but it's not fun. Yeah, well that was it. With Slay the Spire, you walk up to the first enemy and it's got a sword and says 6, and you're like, oh, the dude's hitting me for 6. Oh, I've got a card that says defend for 5. Well, that's okay, I'm only losing 1 hit point. Oh, my guy heals for 6 at the end of battle. Oh, that's good. Well, I'll take the 1 damage and then I can put the rest of it into attack. You know, it was stuff that made a lot of sense. But like I said, then you get to elites and you didn't know what they were doing. But after a while you would. You realize the patterns were very, systemic. There might be some slight variance, but for the most part, the enemies were doing what the enemies were doing, right? And then when people found out, the game was written in Java, so they could just look at the code, and we knew exactly what the enemies were doing. Well, sometimes that exactly meant it's going to be random between these two or these three things. You think one of the critical things about deck builders is that the harder difficulties required to solve problems before you encounter them. Yeah. And that is one of the things that most games don't. The character sort of is able to build up and up and up and eventually is just powerful enough to win. Or the game requires too much preparation of stuff you don't know, like you need to play the game for hundreds of hours, to fully understand what could be happening. And for the most part, it puts strategy games in a weird situation where strategy games, even though they might get big followings and people that will play a lot of hours in the game, that doesn't equate to a lot of sales. But then there's some strategy games that are just, there's a lot of 4X games. Like, if Civ comes out and makes a Civ 7, they're going to make a lot of sales. Right? But if someone else comes out and makes, some other 4X, not going to do too well. And there's a lot of investment and stuff. Whereas making a small roguish game, fairly development light. Not a lot of systems in play. And the ones that are very stripped down. So the common thing in that is that whether it be a little deck builder or a big sprawling strategy game, it's having people stay around long enough to form a community. Almost a card sneaking in. And Sled Spy just sort of came in at a time where there clearly was a market for it. I know myself at the time I was trying to find a lot of different deck builders. Because I really enjoyed the Hearthstone single player content, but there wasn't a lot of stuff out there that kind of did that. Like Hearthstone, fairly simple combat, but where a lot of stuff was either too complex or did feel very, very random.
That's one for the history books.
Trying to remember back to like Vanilla Spire as well. There's a lot of things that were different. Like, I think one of the things that really built Slay the Spire up though was that they put a game out in early access at a time where a lot of the games at early access, it was probably at the worst shape for early access. That was a long period where early access was just games that were rubbish and people didn't want to invest in stuff because by the time you saw it, like you'd get in and play it and stuff, it would just be really bad. And especially a lot of games that, are going to take you well past the 2-hour Steam refund time to work out how bad they are. Spire was good enough, and Twitch had been Twitch for a while. but was still sort of really gathering some steam, right? Well, no pun intended with steam.
Awesome. That's one for the history.
So people were able to see it and check out a lot of games. And see the changes. I think that was one of the big things. Like their early access was, I think it worked really well for them. You know, they were they themselves though, and most of us sort of felt that way. The changes were too often. Like, and so it meant that they were always putting up changes. And then they had the beta realm. In early access, they also had the beta server. So they were able to like post more changes up there that didn't hit the live stuff. I think that helped out a lot.
That is how we do it.
Do we need to do anything? Need to worry about 76? Not really.
That is how we do it.
It's double hit point Moab, so I'm just not flat out not going to go for the insta. We're in a good position. We probably could, but or I think if I was going to, I just would have really cashed in earlier and banked up. I think probably the biggest factor though in Slay the Spire's success versus other games, and it definitely wasn't because it was out first, because it wasn't. There's definitely others that were out at the same time. There were games that came out the same sort of year that Slay the Spire was in early access, and people would come into chat and be like, "Oh, is this made by the same guys that made Slay the Spire?" It's like, no, they're still making Slay the Spire. Hey, Hellstar, how you doing? It's like, oh, it's just because it's a card game as well. It's like, yeah. But the it was a little combination of the difficulty curve was good, but the simplicity was there. You know, people felt like they were being challenged. It felt really good to win. And then it felt it had an opportunity where people knew that there was a chance for mastery and winning multiple times, you know, streaking and stuff. Whereas most other games that I've played either feel like they're just too randomly punishing at certain points, even on like when re-looking at them, or they're just too simple to the point that you don't want, like, and you look at it and go, cool, you've got 50 ascensions. I just don't want to play through them to find out if you get balance somewhere, or if you go from being too simple to stupidly hard in one of those. So Spire didn't have that when it came out. It came out and it was just Slay the Spire, Ironclad and Silent, and that was it. And then Ascensions got added in, and it's like, oh, we can, you know, by the time we'd worked out how to win the game regularly enough, it was like, okay, now it's going to get harder. And then, you know, Defect came along, and then it got harder, and then it got harder, and then it went, you know, jump the shark. But that's a different story.